If reality is true, stable, and powerful, why does it never compete, argue, or struggle to assert itself? This question appears simple, yet it exposes a deep contradiction in how humans relate to existence. Human life is structured almost entirely around competition. Ideas compete for acceptance. Identities compete for recognition. Moral positions compete for dominance. Even truth is often treated as something that must win against alternatives. Yet reality itself behaves very differently. The world continues to function regardless of disagreement. Gravity does not weaken when denied. Time does not pause when questioned. Natural processes unfold without reference to human rivalry or debate. This contrast invites a serious reconsideration. Is competition an intrinsic feature of reality? Or is it a projection created by human cognition? To address this, a distinction must be drawn between ontological reality, which refers to what exists and functions, and comparative cognition, which ranks, opposes, and evaluates. Ibn Arabi argues that reality does not compete because competition belongs to limited perspectives, not to being itself. Modern psychological life is increasingly shaped by comparison. Individuals constantly measure themselves against others socially, intellectually, morally, and professionally. This produces chronic stress, burnout, and a persistent sense of inadequacy. Identity becomes unstable because it depends on relative position rather than intrinsic coherence. From a cognitive science perspective, this pattern is explained by social comparison theory and zero-sum thinking. The mind simplifies complex environments by assuming that gains and losses are mutually exclusive. If one position wins, another must lose. These shortcuts reduce uncertainty but distort reality behaviorally. This results in competition for status, correctness, moral superiority, and validation. Disagreement becomes personal. Criticism feels threatening. Neuroscience shows why this is so reactive. Dopaminergic reward circuits reinforce win-lose dynamics, while threat detection systems activate. When identity is challenged, the core problem is structural. Humans experience life as a contest, while reality itself does not operate competitively. Ibn Arabi reframes competition not as a truth about existence, but as a perceptual distortion arising from limitation. Ibn Arabi was not a moral critic diagnosing social behavior. He was a metaphysician concerned with the structure of being. His question was not how humans should behave, but how reality itself operates prior to human interpretation. At the center of his ontology is a critical distinction. Reality as total presence, forms as partial expressions. Forms appear distinct, limited, and sometimes opposing. Reality, however, is the condition that allows all forms to appear at all. The key premise is simple but profound. Competition presupposes scarcity. Something competes only when it lacks what another possesses. Being itself is not scarce. It does not run out, diminish, or need reinforcement. Rationally, what is all-encompassing cannot compete with what it already contains. Modern thought often treats truth as something that must defeat alternatives. Ibn Arabi treats alternatives as partial expressions contained within reality itself. Competition only arises where perspective is partial. This is the first core teaching. When a viewpoint is limited, it excludes other viewpoints. Exclusion produces rivalry. Ibn Arabi's logic is precise. Limited perspectives clash because each perceives only a fragment of reality, total reality. However, contains all fragments simultaneously and therefore has nothing to compete against. A simple illustration clarifies this. Two people can interpret the same event in opposing ways, each convinced of their correctness. The conflict does not exist in the event itself, it exists in the limited frames through which it is perceived. Cognitive science supports this through frame-based cognition. Perception is always perspectival. Brain constructs meaning by selecting certain features and ignoring others. Conflict arises when partial frames are mistaken for the whole. A common misconception must be addressed. Nan. Competition does not imply passivity or weakness. Stability does not require aggression. Reality does not compete because it does not exclude. The second teaching follows naturally. What is real does not need to defend itself. Defense is a response to threat, not a sign of stability. Ibn Arabi emphasizes that truth functions independently of recognition. Reality does not argue for its existence. It simply operates. A familiar example illustrates this clearly. Gravity does not debate those who deny it. It continues to function regardless of belief. From a neuroscientific perspective, defensive reactivity arises when identity feels threatened. The amygdala activates not because truth is endangered, but because the self has fused with a belief. Psychologically, the urge to defend beliefs often signals attachment rather than certainty. The more aggressively a position is defended, the more fragile the identity supporting it tends to be. The insight is critical. Defense protects the self, not reality. Truth does not compete because it does not need validation. Human experience is filled with opposites, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, success and failure. These opposites coexist continuously. Ibn Arabi explains this by distinguishing manifestation from division. Reality manifests contrasts without being divided by them. Opposites are expressions, not fractures. Cognitive science contrasts dialectical thinking with binary cognition. Binary thinking treats opposites as mutually exclusive. Dialectical thinking allows contradictory elements to coexist within a larger framework. This does not mean compromise or indecision. Inclusion is not weakness, it is structural capacity. Reality does not resolve opposites by eliminating one side. It sustains both. The implication is subtle but powerful. Conflict emerges from interpretation, not from being. Reality holds opposites without choosing sides. Ibn Arabi extends this logic to theology with consistency. Divine reality, in his framework, is not a competitor among forces, beliefs, or identities. Divine reality does not take sides. Conceptually, divine reality manifests all attributes without preference or rivalry. Mercy and justice, creation and dissolution, strength and gentleness, all arise without competition. A modern parallel clarifies this. Natural laws function identically regardless of belief, culture, or ideology. They do not favor one group over another. Psychologically, expecting reality or divinity to validate one side produces frustration and resentment, when reality does not confirm identity-based expectations, it is perceived as unjust. The insight is precise. Reality gives existence, not victory. If reality is non-competitive, why does competition feel unavoidable? The answer lies in cognitive economy. Competition simplifies complexity. From a cognitive science perspective, competition reduces uncertainty by creating clear winners and losers. This satisfies the need for cognitive closure and reduces ambiguity. Ibn Arabi's subtle claim is that competition is a survival strategy, not an ontological truth. It is useful for navigating limited contexts. It becomes destructive when mistaken for the nature of reality itself. A crucial clarification is necessary. Transcending competition does not eliminate discernment, responsibility, or ethical judgment. It simply removes rivalry from ontology. The key insight is this: reality is non-competitive, even though survival cognition is not. The practical implications are significant. The first shift is cognitive, separating survival-based comparison from ontological understanding. Competition may operate at functional levels. It need not define reality itself. Psychologically, this involves reducing identity fusion with opinions, beliefs, and outcomes. When disagreement is no longer existential, emotional reactivity decreases. Neuroscience shows that when threat framing diminishes, prefrontal regulation improves. Emotional responses become proportionate rather than reflexive. This does not mean withdrawal from engagement or conviction. It means engagement without hostility, clarity without rivalry. Ibn Arabi's practical outcome is balanced participation. One can act decisively without treating reality as an adversary. The conclusion follows. Logically, reality does not compete, because competition presupposes lack. What contains all positions cannot be one of them. This is Ibn Arabi's lasting contribution, a vision of being where stability replaces rivalry and inclusion replaces opposition. Humans may compete. Reality continues.